The sea off Zanzibar was black and restless on the night of September 10th, 2011. Waves slapped the hull of a vessel straining under the weight of its passengers, a ship meant for routine island crossings, but now carrying far more souls than it was built to hold. The Spice Islander. I was leaving the port of Unguja, heading toward Pemba Island, a journey that should have lasted only a few hours. Families gathered on the decks with their bags and belongings, children tucked close to mothers, elderly travelers settling in for a sleepless night. The air smelled of salt and diesel. Beneath the noise of conversation and coughing engines, the sea whispered warnings no one could hear. The Spice Islander. I was an aging ferry, a relic from the 1960s, originally built in Greece before being sold and resold, ending its days in Tanzanian waters. Officially, its capacity was under 600 passengers. On that night, the count was more than double. Manifest sheets would later prove useless, many boarded without tickets, sneaking on in the rush, while others bribed their way past gatekeepers. Reports after the fact suggested anywhere from 1,500 to 3,000 people might have been on board. Entire families pressed together on every available space, corridors, stairwells, even the roof of the ferry. Trucks and cargo crammed into the hold, shifting with the sea. The atmosphere was tense but familiar. Overcrowding on ferries in the region was routine, a dangerous normalcy accepted by those with no alternatives. As the Spice Islander cut away from shore, the glow of Zanzibar's lights receded into the horizon. The vessel strained forward. For the first hours, nothing seemed unusual. Conversations hummed. Children cried and dozed. Prayers murmured softly through the night air. Then, sometime past midnight, passengers began to feel the vessel listing. A subtle tilt at first, then stronger with every roll of the sea. Cargo below had shifted, heavy trucks pressing to one side. The old ferry groaned against the imbalance. On deck, some passengers whispered nervously, others dismissed the fear as nothing more than weather. But below, in the engine room, panic had begun. The crew knew the vessel was unstable, its weight uneven, and with every swell, the tilt deepened. Chaos erupted as the Spice Islander I began to heel dangerously to its starboard side. Passengers scrambled toward the opposite rail, but the movement only made things worse. The ship rolled farther. People clutched children, screamed, and prayed aloud. In the darkness, with only weak deck lights, confusion reigned. There were no adequate life jackets for thousands. Lifeboats, already too few, were jammed and inaccessible. Then came the final lurch. The vessel capsized in the middle of the Zanzibar Channel, taking with it hundreds still trapped inside cabins and cargo holds. Within minutes, the Black Sea swallowed the ferry whole, leaving only cries for help and bodies thrashing in the water. The scene was nightmarish. Survivors clung to planks, mattresses, plastic containers, anything that floated. Parents tried to keep children above water as waves separated them in seconds. Some swam blindly, searching for relatives. Others gave up, exhausted, their voices silenced by the weight of the sea. The darkness compounded the horror. Only those who had managed to scramble clear of the ferry's pull in time had a chance. For the rest, the ship became a steel coffin, dragging hundreds to the bottom with it. Those trapped in lower decks never even reached the surface. News of the disaster broke at dawn. Rescue boats launched from Zanzibar and the Tanzanian mainland, but they were ill-equipped for a catastrophe of this scale. Fishermen were the first to arrive, pulling dozens of survivors into their small wooden vessels, risking capsizing themselves under the load. Navy ships and helicopters followed, scouring the channel, hauling the living and the dead from the waves. Survivors described desperate hours in the water, swallowing salt, arms burning from clinging to debris. One man later recalled holding on to his young daughter until her grip slipped from his hand in the dark. He never saw her again. Another woman, pregnant, floated for hours before being hauled aboard a rescue boat, shivering and dazed, with no knowledge of where her husband had gone. For every miraculous survival, there were dozens of bodies pulled lifeless from the water. By the time recovery slowed, the scale of tragedy was clear. Officially, more than 2,000 had been on board. The confirmed death toll exceeded 1,500, making it one of the deadliest maritime disasters of the 21st century. The images were seared into Tanzanian memory. Rows of bodies laid out on the shore under white sheets, survivors shivering in shock, distraught families searching through lists at hospitals and makeshift morgues. Mass graves were dug on Pemba Island when the numbers became too great to bury individually. The wailing of mothers filled the air as the scale of the loss overwhelmed the small communities, where nearly everyone knew someone who had been on board. Anger followed grief. People demanded to know how such an old ferry had been allowed to operate so far past its limits, how port authorities had permitted boarding to spiral so far beyond capacity. Overcrowding was common knowledge, yet no one in power intervened. Survivors testified to the chaos of boarding, the lack of life jackets, the insufficient lifeboats. Officials promised inquiries, reforms, new safety measures. But Tanzanians had heard such promises before. The Spice Islander disaster was not the first ferry tragedy to strike their waters. In 1996, the MV Bukoba had sunk on Lake Victoria, killing more than 800. In 2009, the MV Skagit capsized near Zanzibar with dozens dead. Each time, investigations brought pledges, but little lasting change. The captain of the Spice Islander. I was among the survivors pulled from the sea. He and several crew members were later arrested, facing charges of negligence and manslaughter. Government officials came under scrutiny, accused of looking the other way as ferries regularly carried far beyond safe limits. Yet for the families burying loved ones, legal battles meant little. They were left with empty homes, missing fathers, vanished children. Entire lineages were cut short in a single night. Survivors carried invisible wounds, nightmares of being trapped underwater, the memory of loved ones torn from their arms. The disaster was more than a news story. It was a scar that reshaped communities across Zanzibar and Pemba, the Spice Islander. Tragedy forced the world to look briefly at a region where maritime safety had long been neglected. International aid brought new boats, stricter inspections, training for crews. But over time, attention faded. Life in Zanzibar returned to the rhythm of fishing boats, crowded ferries, and island crossings. Tourists still came for beaches and spices, often unaware of the mass graveyards just beyond the shore. Yet for the families who lost, the sea was never the same. Each crossing became a reminder. Each wave carried echoes of screams swallowed by water. Today, the Spice Islander. I rest at the bottom of the channel, a rusting tomb that few will ever see. Divers rarely visit. Currents are strong and the wreck is deep. But for those who know the story, the wreck is not forgotten. It is a reminder of human negligence, of how routine can disguise danger until tragedy strikes. Overcrowding and chaos turned an ordinary night crossing into one of the deadliest maritime disasters of modern times. The silence of the sea above the wreck is deceptive, hiding the memory of panic, of voices crying out in the dark, of lives that ended together in the cold waters off Zanzibar. Thank you for listening to The Sunken Ledger. Subscribe for more true stories from the depths.